You ever have that sinking feeling? That feeling in your gut that something's just off, even though everything around you looks normal? That was me, standing on my porch at 7:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, staring at the empty space where 2 Amazon packages were supposed to be. I had the delivery confirmation email, both dropped off at 6:47 p.m. the night before. They weren't there now. At first, I thought maybe my wife had brought them inside. Or maybe one of the neighborhood kids had swiped them as a prank. But the more I looked around, the more that gut feeling twisted into something sharper, something colder. We live in one of those cookie-cutter suburban neighborhoods. You know the kind: perfect lawns, matching mailboxes, and the ever-looming presence of the homeowners association. Our HOA president, Karen Madsen, ruled the neighborhood like a suburban dictator in yoga pants. Everyone called her HOA Karen, behind her back, of course, and Karen? She was always watching. She had a Ring camera on her front door, a Blink cam on her garage, and somehow knew whenever someone parked a few inches over the curb line. I once got a violation notice for leaving my trash bin out 15 minutes too late. 15 minutes, but back to the packages. They weren't expensive. One was a replacement garage door remote. The other? Some garden lights my wife had been excited about installing. Nothing flashy. Nothing tempting. Or so I thought. Later that morning, while checking my own security camera footage, I caught a glimpse of someone walking up to my porch, just after sunset. A short, hunched figure, wearing a puffy jacket, sunglasses at night, and a wide-brimmed sun hat pulled low. It was subtle. Deliberate. They approached like they belonged there. Grabbed the 2 boxes. Turned. Walked off like they were doing a chore. The camera angle didn't catch the face directly. But I paused it. Zoomed in. And the walk, the posture, the timing. It was Karen. HOA Karen. At first, I didn't want to believe it. I even laughed it off. No way, I muttered. She wouldn't, right? But then came the neighborhood Facebook group post: reminder to all residents. Karen had written, as per new HOA guidelines, certain supplies delivered to individual homes may be redistributed for community use if deemed necessary. Please remember, this is our neighborhood. My heart dropped. She took my packages, and claimed they were for the community. This wasn't just a theft. This was a justified heist under the guise of some made-up HOA rule. I knew then, I had to get to the bottom of this. I wasn't going to let HOA Karen get away with this nonsense, not this time. The moment I read Karen's post, I felt my blood pressure spike. Redistributed for community use? What did that even mean? This wasn't a food bank. It was a suburban neighborhood where the biggest daily emergency was someone's dog pooping on the wrong lawn. And now, apparently, Karen had appointed herself Supreme Chancellor of Package Appropriations. I spent the rest of that afternoon in a haze of disbelief and anger, rereading the post again and again. It was passive-aggressively worded, of course, just vague enough to sound official but slippery enough to avoid direct blame. Classic Karen. It ended with her usual smug signature: yours in stewardship, Karen M., HOA President. That line alone made me want to punch a pillow. I dug through the HOA bylaws we'd been given when we moved in 2 years ago. I flipped through every dry, soul-crushing page of that beige 3-ring binder labeled Sunridge Estates HOA Covenant Code. There was nothing about package redistribution, community supplies, or any clause that would justify someone snatching deliveries off personal property. But that wasn't even the worst part. Later that evening, my neighbor, Thomas, texted me. He had seen my post in the smaller neighborhood chat group where I had vented, asking if anyone else had missing packages. "Check this out," he wrote. attaching a screenshot that it was from the main HOA Facebook page again. Karen had uploaded a photo, my packages, opened and stacked neatly on a folding table inside the HOA clubhouse. The garden lights were unboxed, displayed as if part of a prize giveaway. The garage remote was sitting next to a handwritten sign that read, "For community use, shared tools and equipment table." I nearly dropped my phone, there was no mistaking it. My wife had ordered a very specific brand of solar garden lights, blue casing with rounded caps. You couldn't just find those at Walmart. And now they were being rebranded as some kind of communal property. I stormed over to the clubhouse. It was after hours, of course, but I didn't care. I just wanted confirmation. I peered through the glass door, and there it was. The table. The display. My stuff. Just sitting there, and right behind the table, like the final cherry on this twisted sundae, was a poster Karen had printed that said, "Shared by residents, for residents. Let's build a better neighborhood." Oh, I was building something all right. A case. The next morning, I requested a formal meeting with the HOA board. Of course, Karen responded first, happy to clarify at the upcoming meeting. "I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding." A misunderstanding? She took boxes off my porch. That wasn't a misunderstanding, that was theft. But I knew Karen's game. She thrived on optics. She'd spin it, twist it, and dress it up in community buzzwords until half the board was nodding along like hypnotized sheep. I needed more than outrage. I needed evidence. And I needed support. That evening, I went door to door. Quietly. Calmly. I asked my neighbors if they'd noticed anything strange with their deliveries lately. The answers trickled in, more than a few yes. One neighbor, Mrs. Harris, said she thought her walking sticks from a medical supplier had just been delayed. Another, young couple across the street, said their camping gear had mysteriously gone missing right after it was marked, "Delivered." That's when it clicked, this wasn't a one-time thing. Karen had been doing this for weeks. Maybe longer, and she wasn't just stealing. She was curating some twisted, community lending library out of our personal property. I was done playing nice. This HOA meeting wasn't going to be a misunderstanding. It was going to be Judgment Day. The night of the HOA meeting arrived like a thundercloud. The clubhouse, usually half empty for these routine gatherings, was packed wall to wall. Word had gotten out. My quiet neighborhood of fence height disputes and lawn care gossip had suddenly become ground zero for a suburban scandal. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when Karen got called out. I walked in with a USB stick in my pocket, security footage from my camera, with a slow-motion clip of Karen in her ridiculous disguise hauling away my boxes. I'd also printed still images, time-stamped, in case the projector just happened to be broken. I'd done my homework. I was prepared. Karen was already there, seated at the head of the board's folding table, wearing her HOA name badge like it was a police badge. She smiled when she saw me, but there was a tightness to it. She knew. She just didn't know how much I knew. The meeting began with the usual procedural nonsense, minutes from the last meeting, treasury updates, talk about repainting the pool house. I sat there, hands clenched, waiting for the moment. It came at exactly 6:42 p.m. Next, Karen said, glancing at her notes, "A resident has requested time to discuss a concern involving recent package deliveries and community sharing policies." I stood up. Cleared my throat. "My name is Daniel Hargrove. I live at 118 Sycamore Lane. And my packages were stolen from my porch last week." There was a ripple through the room. I saw heads turn, neighbors glance at one another. Karen's smile stiffened. "I have security footage," I continued, pulling out the USB, "of someone removing my packages without my consent. Those packages then appeared, opened, in this very clubhouse, labeled as community supplies. Karen spoke up before I could move toward the laptop. Let's pause there, Daniel. First, let me just say, this is a misunderstanding. We've recently implemented a policy, an informal one, mind you, where residents can contribute useful items for community use. I assumed those boxes had been left out for that purpose. My voice cut in before she could steamroll the room. That's interesting, Karen, because I never signed anything. Never offered anything. And here, I held up the printouts, handing them to each board member, is you, walking up my steps, taking them. Not asking. Not knocking. Taking. The room went quiet. The kind of quiet that only happens when people start realizing they've been played. A few board members looked genuinely surprised. One of them, David, the treasurer, adjusted his glasses and peered at the photo. Karen, is this really you? Karen opened her mouth, probably to deny it. But I didn't give her the chance. I pressed play on the laptop. The video popped up on the projector. There she was, in her ridiculous disguise, sun hat, puffy coat, sunglasses, like some dollar store spy, casually lifting the packages and walking off. Someone in the back actually gasped. I believe, I said, loud and clear, that qualifies as theft under state law. But let's pretend, for a second, it doesn't. I checked our HOA bylaws. Nowhere does it say the HOA or its president has the authority to redistribute resident property. You made that rule up. And you didn't just do it to me. I turned to the crowd. How many of you have had packages go missing in the last month? Half a dozen hands went up. More. Karen looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. She started to speak, stammering something about good intentions and pilot programs, but the board had seen enough. David leaned forward. Karen, with all due respect, you need to step aside while we review this. This is serious. But it didn't stop there. Someone in the back shouted. She took my heating pad and called it a shared medical resource. Another yelled. She grabbed my Halloween decorations right off my stoop. The room erupted. Suddenly, it wasn't just about me. It was about all of us, the quiet neighbors who'd let too much slide, thinking Karen was just overzealous, not outright lawless. She tried to regain control. Raised her voice. Everyone, please. I did this for you. For the good of the neighborhood. We need structure, we need order. No, Karen, I said quietly. We need a new president. And that's when the board voted to suspend her. Right there on the spot, she stood frozen. For the first time since I'd met her, Karen had no words. No smug comments. No clipboard. Just silence. As she left the room, clutching her handbag like it might protect her from the weight of reality, I felt a strange mix of relief and disbelief, but something told me this wasn't the end. People like Karen? They don't go quietly. You'd think it ended there. Karen stripped of her HOA badge, slinking away in shame after the board suspended her. That should have been the end. But in neighborhoods like ours, people like Karen don't vanish. They recalculate. The days after the meeting, the clubhouse, community table, disappeared overnight. Everything was gone, my garden lights, the remote, even the janky clipboard she used for signouts. No note. No explanation. It was like she was trying to erase the evidence, rewrite history. But I had backups, and half the neighborhood had witnessed the meeting. The illusion of her authority was shattered. The board sent out a formal notice a week later. Karen M. was suspended pending an investigation, her access to HOA communications and facilities revoked. An interim president, David, the treasurer who had backed me during the meeting, was appointed. He came by personally, shook my hand, and thanked me for restoring accountability. His words. Not mine. For the first time in months, the neighborhood felt lighter. People talked more. Laughed more. Packages started arriving and staying put. A few folks even held a porch party, a joke to celebrate being able to keep deliveries without fear of forced redistribution. It felt good. Like we'd wrested back a piece of sanity, but that calm didn't last. That IT started subtly. A week after the meeting, Karen began posting in the unofficial community group chat. Not the HOA's official page, she'd been locked out of that. No, this was the side channel group she once used to gossip and correct behavior. She rebranded her posts under the banner of the Sunridge Watch, a supposed neighborhood accountability network. It was all phrased like public service, but the undertone was unmistakable. Her first post was tame: just observed a delivery left unattended at 134 Sycamore for more than 3 hours. Please remember, porch theft is real. The irony almost made me choke. Then came her tips on neighborhood safety. Little warnings. Vague accusations. Reminder: unsecured outdoor items can attract the wrong kind of attention. Or, some residents still haven't approved their holiday lights with the board. Tacky displays affect resale values. She wasn't gone. She was lurking. Circling. Trying to reinsert herself into the bloodstream of the neighborhood like a virus that survived the first round of antibiotics. A few neighbors bought into it, people who missed the meeting, or who had always been part of Karen's little circle. They reposted her warnings, nodded along. But most of us had seen too much. We'd seen the footage. The arrogance. The sheer entitlement. So we started pushing back. One neighbor, Mrs. Harris, the elderly woman whose walking sticks had been confiscated by Karen, posted a photo of them returned in a garbage bag, broken. She captioned it, "Courtesy of our former president." Guess they weren't useful to the community anymore. It went viral within the group. The tide was turning. I didn't want to be a hero. I didn't want to lead a crusade. But people started coming to me, asking for advice, asking me to run for president in the next election cycle. At first, I laughed it off. I was just a guy who wanted his packages. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized, if we didn't stay vigilant, Karen, or someone like her, would claw their way back into power. Control, once taken, doesn't just disappear. It hides. It waits. So yeah. I ran. And I won. The next HOA meeting had a bigger turnout than the last. We updated the bylaws, officially. We added a clause about unauthorized removal of property. We added term limits. We added transparency protocols. And we sent a clear message: this was a neighborhood. Not a kingdom. As for Karen, last I heard, she moved out a few months later. Sold her house quietly and left no forwarding address. But even now, when I see an unfamiliar car cruise down the street too slowly, or catch a glimpse of a wide-brimmed sun hat in a store window, I still get that flash of adrenaline, because once you've dealt with a HOA Karen, you never really relax again. You just stay prepared, and you guard your porch.